Thank you, Joseph, and good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Ogden, and welcome to those who are online as well. I'm Tim Vandenack, and I'll be helping with the service today. How is everybody? I hope you're all doing good. Dylan Zwick, who's in the back, helping with tech right now, will be our main speaker today, exploring the idea of judgment and some of the contradictory positions people hold about it. Being judgmental is considered a bad thing, but being judicious is considered good. What's the difference? We all need to make judgments, so what can be our guide? Before all that, a few preliminaries, a few announcements. First off, today, after the service, we'll have coffee, a few snacks, I think, downstairs, as before the pandemic. So come on down, have a coffee, join in some conversation. The plan is to keep it up for the services we hold here, kind of slowly getting back to the traditional things we've been doing. And FYI, we're in the process of taking inventory of everything in the building as part of the plans to sell eventually. Some of the things we'll keep, some we'll sell, some we'll probably toss out. So those efforts are ongoing and will continue on this coming Thursday, as well as August 25th. I know Karen noted in the newsletter that she was looking for help. Don't see her out there today, or I would have asked her where things stand. So, and also related to that, the building has been listed, which means it's essentially up for sale at this point. And our longtime member, Bev Daly, good morning, had a birthday party Saturday, yesterday. I heard it was a pretty good party, so happy birthday to you. Hope it was a good party. Sounds like it was pretty fun. So as you can see, the choir is back in action. Joseph, our music leader, is inviting new voices to join. They meet an hour before each service held here for practice. And a quick roundup of the regular UUCO activities. And again, details on these and everything are in the church newsletter. Codger Coffee meets Fridays, 9:30 in the morning at Grounds for Coffee at 30th and Harrison. The UUCO Book Club meets the second Wednesday of each month at 7 p.m. The Potluck Video Club meets the second Friday of each month at 6 p.m. So now the UU Church is an open, tolerant place where diversity of thought is encouraged and appreciated. Doesn't matter who you love or how you identify yourself. We come here because we want to think for ourselves, want space where we can ponder spiritual questions on our own terms. We ask questions, value the exchange of ideas, want to hear from others. There are a range of beliefs among those here. Generally, though, we believe in caring for the planet and caring for one another. We are a lay-led ministry, which means the messages come from everyone here, everyone contributes, and everyone adds to the atmosphere. Glad you are all here. Now, joys and sorrows. So, as inspired, come on up to announce any sorrows, stuff that's not so great news, some of the tougher things we're going through, or joys, some of the good things we've been going through. We'll mix it up. So as inspired, say a joy, say a sorrow. Today we have a microphone up at the front. Suzanne there is handling the microphone. So the plan is to go to Suzanne, say your joy and or sorrow, and then we'll pass it along to the next person. If anybody online is so inspired, type in the chat box and we will read that. I'll I'll get a cue. We'll somehow get that out there as well. So, yeah, so let's begin, I guess. Is that, I'm not hearing the microphone up front? Now give it a try. There you go.
Jeannie, I just wanted to reiterate what she said. My mother, Beverly Valley, had a birthday party yesterday. Thank all of you who came, and I'm sorry you couldn't make it, but it was 2.5 hours of really wonderful times with friends and views. And then the rainstorm hit, but it was perfect because we got all about to curl together in the rain, and get a little cozier before everybody had to leave. But the rain was a real blessing.
My phone actually just reminded me that today is the 10-year anniversary of my brain surgery, so it's 10 years since I last had a seizure.
Hey, my name is Mr. Minnesota, I've Texas, been here since 2017. Overjoyed to be healthy enough to be able to resume my work. I have 40 years of material in Houston, success story dealing with homelessness and all the mistakes made over the way. Working with the Utah Investigative Journalism Project. And something about a couple of weeks ago, front page on the Tribune about the abatement process, the horrendous horrible practice that the city, county, and health departments have been doing. So a lot of the things are moving right now. So that's actually hoping to catch up to you later in the week. Just a lot of good things. The homeless are being organized. There's a report from 2020 that laid out through the printer policy center that identified all the problems we see today and laid out a 6-point plan that it will be interesting to see legislators who are on the science. And they already have a problem honoring people's intent. So it should be a great thing. Reaching out to the filmmaking community, networking, developing series of stories that will be effective in getting notices. If you still have to do it for the city, I have a real prayer that you all will be a model of on the state level. So hopefully we'll see the end of homelessness as we know it. At least that's my prayer. My son is entering St. Joseph's High School, and I got a part-time job there, and so I'm pretty happy. So happy. Thank you all. Right.
When I was born, and my sorrow today is the unexpected death of a great grandson yesterday. He was born with a heart condition and he had a heart transplant in his first month. He had a 3-year-old boy. Got in trouble and did all the boy things. So it was a shock to all of us. We're still trying to process that. Thank you for listening.
Sorry.
Well, mine's a joy, I guess. My baby daughter is now in Onstock, Germany, ready to go to Poland. She just became a major in the U.S. Army. And I got a video from her this morning showing some of the people she worked with and where she's going to be in Poland. It's pretty exciting.
Thank you. Others?
I just wanted to mention that on Thursday, we had a celebration, a memorial service for Tom Taylor, that most of you remember.
He was not only a member of this congregation for years, he was a very important member. He was also a member of our Codger Coffee group. So we'll be looking for replacements.
Anybody else? Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for sharing.
Anything online by the, okay. Singing bowl, Joseph. Today, we're talking about judges, judgment, and in a roundabout way, justice. So I picked Justice, Meaning, and Purpose by Reverend David Breeden for our chalice lighting reading. Breeden puts an emphasis on the import of listening. We light this chalice, remembering and honoring our own tradition and celebrating the rich diversity of traditions among us. As we search for justice, meaning, and purpose, may we remember that justice, meaning, and purpose live first in deeply listening to one another. And now our chalice lighting words. Claudia Koch will light the chalice today, so come on up. And the chalice lighting words should be in the order of service. We light this chalice for the warmth of love, for the light of truth, and for the energy of action. All right, thank you, Claudia. Our opening hymn, Joseph.
Oh, there we go. Please join us in singing hymn number 121 in the right hymnal. We'll build the land, and we're going to do verses 1, 2, and 3.
Free, where the oil of
The reading today comes from a number of sources, each offering a different take and perspective on the notion of judging and justice, ideas that seem to commingle. It's a pretty wide open topic. This first one comes from the syllabus of a Justice and Multiculturalism class at the State University of New York at Albany. I thought it succinctly addressed some of the conflicting notions surrounding justice. Justice is often defined as fairness or equal treatment. However, the concept of justice is complex. What an individual considers just is shaped not only by personal characteristics, such as gender, race, ethnicity, age, and socioeconomic status, but by the time and place in which he or she lives. What is just remains a matter for debate. Observing the same outcome of a situation, one person may say justice was done, another may declare the outcome of injustice and great wrong. The second one comes from an article called Justice and Fairness in Issues in Ethics, first written in 1990 and updated in 2018. Justice, then, is a central part of ethics and should be given due consideration in our moral lives. In evaluating any moral decision, we must ask whether our actions treat all persons equally. If not, we must determine whether the difference in treatment is justified. Are the criteria we are using relevant to the situation at hand? But justice is not the only principle to consider in making ethical decisions. Sometimes principles of justice may need to be overridden in favor of other kinds of moral claims, such as rights or society's welfare. Nevertheless, justice is an expression of our mutual recognition of each other's basic dignity and an acknowledgement that if we are to live together in an interdependent community, we must treat each other as equals. This next one comes from Sir Andrew Leakerman, writing in the Harvard Business Review. He spoke with chief executive officers from a range of firms to get their take on what constitutes good judgment, how one acquires it, how one applies it. I've found that leaders with good judgment tend to be good listeners and readers, able to hear what other people actually mean, and thus able to see patterns that others do not. They have a breadth of experiences and relationships that enable them to recognize parallels or analogies that others miss. And if they don't know something, they'll know someone who does and lean on that person's judgment. They can recognize their own emotions and biases and take them out of the equation. They're adept at expanding the array of choices under consideration. Finally, they remain grounded in the real world. In making a choice, they also consider its implementation. The 6 basic components of good judgment, Leakerman says, are learning, trust, experience, detachment, options, and delivery. This next one comes from Paulo Coelho, a Brazilian lyricist and novelist. We can never judge the lives of others because each person knows only their own pain and renunciation. It's one thing to feel that you are on the right path, but it's another to think that yours is the only path. And this next one, last one, comes from the American author Mark Twain. Good judgment is the result of experience, and experience the result of bad judgment. It's always a good one. And with that, Dylan, time for our main talk.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you also to Suzanne for the help this morning, and Joseph. The choir sounds great. Thank you all, and it's great to have to be back with the choir. The topic for today's service is judges, and judgment. Depicted in the slide above me is the fresco on the altar of the Sistine Chapel in Vatican City. Completed by Michelangelo 25 years after he finished the Sistine Chapel ceiling, it is the central focus of what may be the most famous painting in all of Western art. And it appropriately depicts the central focus of traditional Western religion, the Last Judgment. The final and eternal judgment by God of all humanity that will take place upon the return and second coming of Christ. The idea being that at the end of days, the final point of history, all people who ever lived will be called upon to account for the choices they made within their brief lives. And based upon these choices, a single binary judgment will be made to determine whether one is damned for all eternity or saved from this damnation. It is worth noting that those who go to heaven are not typically called the good, the elect, or the blessed, or something that would directly address what it is that they are, but are instead called the saved, a reference to what they are not. Damnation is the central idea. Punishment is the foundation. The duality here is central to so much of Western thought. We search for the simplicity of a binary. Black or white, man or woman, one or zero, winner or loser, right or wrong, good or evil. However, the world is rarely so simple, and people never are. Any human being is a complex and complicated creature with a history of decisions and circumstances about whom any binary classification is absurdly reductive. And a rejection of this binary perspective is what I believe to be the most significant distinction between Unitarian Universalism and the traditional Western Christianity from which it emerged. We Unitarians like to claim, or even to believe, that we do not judge. However, I think this formulation is a profound misstatement, if not misunderstanding, of who we really are. It is not so much we do not judge. It is that we do not damn. That is what's important. Now, judgment is a word with confusing and even contradictory connotations in the English language. Few of us would like to be judgmental, but we view judicious as a compliment. The distinction between judgment and the broader term choice is often unclear. Judgment typically means a choice we make about how we perceive the worth of another person, but in practice, this isn't always true. If we say a person has good or poor judgment, that doesn't necessarily mean they do an exceptional job of assessing the worth of others. It just means they tend to make wise or foolish choices. And it is impossible to be conscious and alive without making choices. We make dozens before we get out of bed in the morning. Getting out of bed itself is a choice. You all made a choice to come here today. The only way it would be possible to never judge would be to never think. So we should admit that, yes, we do judge all the time. And this judgment is frequently of other people. And that's okay. It's important not so much to avoid judgment, but to understand that judgment can and should by all reason be non-binary and open to revision. We should be careful with that pernicious binary, better or worse, as compared to its more inclusive counterpart, different. Finally, we should be very, very careful, not when it comes to making judgments, but when it comes to punishment. Not who am I to judge, but who am I to punish? Who am I to damn? Now, judgments are not made only by individuals or by God. They are made by institutions. In fact, the obvious inspiration for the Last Judgment is a Western conception of a legal system, an institution that constructs rules which binds its members, processes the handling of violations, and the punishment of the violators. The philosophical idea of such an institution is known as the state. And in 1919, Max Weber, in his work Politics as a Vocation, identified the defining characteristic of the state as possessing a monopoly on the use of coercive violence. An institution that claims for itself a monopoly on the basest form of punishment. I think this characterization is essentially correct. Now, the relationship between the institutions that can judge and punish here on earth, the states, and those which claim an understanding or an influence on judgment and punishment hereafter, the churches, has historically had some issues. The Enlightenment, from which the foundation of our nation emerged, began, in part, as a reaction to the destruction caused by the religious arguments fused with the powers of the state. And a desire to avoid similar destruction is central to the very foundation of our Constitution, and therefore, our country. Now, I spoke a month ago about patriotism and the Declaration of Independence. Today, I want to speak a little bit about that other foundational and even more important document, the US Constitution. It is, like the Declaration of Independence, a work of fallible, hypocritical, provincial, and selfish men that contains many vestigial and mediocre ideas that we are burdened with today. For example, the absurd electoral college that we use to choose the president. The same is true of the Bill of Rights, which contains within its Third Amendment a right deemed so important that it had to be enshrined within the Constitution itself, and has since proved so irrelevant that it has literally never came up in the entire history of US jurisprudence. And a Ninth Amendment that is so broad and vague that most jurists today believe it has no binding legal meaning whatsoever. But in spite of all these issues, it is a profound legal document. Not so much, in my opinion, for the structure of the government that it sets up, although it could have done much worse, but for the restrictions on government that it establishes. The First Amendment guarantees of freedom of speech, the press, and the exercise of religion place critical and, for its time, radical restrictions on the proper role of government. More precisely, on the extent to which the state is allowed to use coercive force. There were critical parts of human life over which the state was not allowed to judge, or more precisely, over which the state was not allowed to punish, over which the state was not allowed to damn. This was, in my opinion, the most important and the best idea within the US Constitution. There are certain things which the state is not allowed to punish. And with respect to these things, the proper role of the state is only to prevent others from punishing instead. Now here, of course, when I say punishment, I don't mean consequences. Nobody has the right, for example, to say what they wish without fear of judgment from their fellow citizens. And those judgments can carry consequences, but not the damning consequences of physical injury or the loss of freedom. Now, surprisingly, the authors of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, having established these fundamental individual rights into the establishment of our government itself, then provided absolutely no mechanism or guidance for its enforcement. None. Perhaps they thought they would all be just like the Third Amendment and never come up. The First Amendment says explicitly that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. Okay, well, what if Congress does make such a law? What happens then? The Constitution doesn't say. Enter judges. Within our government, the judicial branch is tasked with determining whether the law has been broken and what punishment should be when it is. Its job is not to make the law or determine what the law should be, but to make the call on individual instances of its application. However, there's a problem. I know this is hard to believe, but legislatures are imperfect. The laws they pass are often vague, unclear, or even contradictory. And if there is confusion, the legislature can't be called upon to clarify. This is true within the Bill of Rights itself. What exactly is an unreasonable search or seizure? What qualifies as just compensation? And what punishments are cruel and unusual? Well, when questions such as these arrive, judges are required by necessity to provide clarification as to what the law means. Generally speaking, they don't like to do this and try to avoid it when possible, as clarifying the law can be an awful lot like making the law, which should not be the judge's responsibility or within their power. And there's another problem. Again, I know this is hard to believe, But judges are also imperfect. In particular, one judge doesn't always have the same opinion as another, and you can have the situation where one federal judge says the law means one thing, and another says it means something else. Now, given federal law is supposed to be the same throughout the country, how is this resolved? Enter the Supreme Court. Its primary function is to ensure regularity. Its purpose is to step in when there is disagreement and confusion within the judiciary itself and provide clarity. In particular, in the 1803 case Marbury versus Madison, perhaps the single most important decision in American constitutional law, the Supreme Court stepped in to provide clarity as to what the US Constitution is. The court decided that the Constitution is indeed actual law and not just a statement of principles or ideals, and that the court has the power to overturn a law of Congress if it violates the Constitution. This principle, known as judicial review, means the Supreme Court is the ultimate arbiter on what the Constitution means and how it is applied. So, given judges have such power in determining the meaning of the law, how do they do it? In practice, although they won't admit it, they frequently decide based upon what they would like the law to be, or even the outcome they want for a particular case. See, for example, Bush v. Gore. But there are two popular philosophies that warrant some consideration. The first is originalism, the philosophy that what the Constitution means is what its text meant at the time that it was ratified. So, to determine whether the search of, say, a cell phone is unreasonable, the judge must try to determine whether people in 1787 would have thought it reasonable, assuming they understood what a cell phone is. The second is the idea of a living constitution, in which the Constitution is an evolving document whose meaning can change based upon the changing views of our society. So, for example, what unreasonable means is not what it meant in 1787, but what it means today. Finally, there is the principle of stare decisis, which relates to the goal of the Supreme Court to maintain regularity. This principle is that over time, the court endeavors to sustain its past opinions. Now, over a period of about 20 years, stretching from around 1954 to 1973, the Supreme Court, in alignment with evolving views within our country, significantly expanded, or at the very least clarified, the meaning of the Constitution in numerous cases respecting individual liberty. In 1954, Brown versus Board of Education declared racial segregation in public schools unconstitutional, overturning a 58-year precedent. And over the next 20 years, in cases like Gideon v. Wainwright, Miranda v. Arizona, Griswold v. Connecticut, Loving v. Virginia, and Furman versus Georgia, it established the rights to a defense attorney provided by the government, the requirement to be made aware of your rights under arrest, the right to privacy, the overturning of miscegenation laws, and even, for a while, the abolition of the death penalty. But perhaps the most famous of these is the 1973 case, Roe versus Wade, in which the court decided that a woman's right to choose to have an abortion is protected as a right to privacy within the Constitution. Six weeks ago, in Dobbs v. Jackson, the essential foundation of Roe v. Wade was overturned. I was honestly surprised it happened. In the 1992 case, Planned Parenthood versus Casey, a court that consisted of 8 Republican nominees, 7 of whom were nominated by presidents who opposed abortion rights, and in which the only Democrat nominee was one of Roe's 2 original dissenters, upheld a woman's right to choose. If it survived that court, surely, I thought, it could survive any. And it seemed like the Republicans honestly had a good deal. As long as abortion was protected by the Constitution, they could use the issue to persuade and motivate the religious right without needing to deal with the consequences or the difficulties of actually outlawing the procedure. But that is no longer the case today. This fundamental right is now an issue over which the state can claim the right to punish. And certainly here in Utah, it will do so. We must now have what is essentially a religious argument within the context of the state. The type of argument our Constitution endeavored to avoid. Now, Unitarian Universalism is officially pro-choice. 3 months ago, the UUA issued a statement reiterating that as Unitarian Universalists, we believe that all bodies are sacred. Every person has the right to determine if, when, and how they want to have children. As people of faith, this commitment is part of our sincerest religious values. Unitarian Universalism proclaims that all individuals and communities have the right to self-determination, safety, and the resources that are necessary for health and sustainability. As a faith tradition, we are committed to reproductive justice, which espouses the human right to have children, not to have children, to parent the children one has in healthy environments, and to safeguard bodily autonomy and to express one's sexuality freely. In 1915, we issued a statement of conscience embracing this framework, which was created by women of color in the 1990s. We remain dedicated to this work. Comprehensive reproductive care, including access to abortion, is essential to the health and well-being of women and pregnant people. We will continue to work with those most impacted by this harmful decision to fight for the permanent state and federal legislation that codifies and enshrines the right to access abortion care. Our faith still urgently calls us to advocate on behalf of all people to be able to readily access safe, legal abortion care whenever and wherever they need it. We will not rest until that reality is true across the country. End of statement. We have a fight ahead of us. While I'm revolted by the idea that an individual's bodily autonomy is something requiring public permission, my hope is that we can, over time, reach some form of democratic consensus on abortion, and that those who seek to outlaw it face the backlash of reality they deserve. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, while unquestionably supporting the constitutional protection of a woman's right to choose, was surprisingly lukewarm on Roe v. Wade itself. She criticized its reasoning, its broad scope, and its timing. And in a speech in 1992, claimed that Roe, quote, halted a political process that was moving in a reform direction and thereby, I believe, prolonged divisiveness and deferred stable settlement of this issue. Now, while I admire the late Justice Ginsburg very much, I'm not sure that her advice on timing should be viewed as sacrosanct, but perhaps she had a point. That political process has been violently restarted, and we can work towards its stable settlement in favor of the right to choose, while attempting to minimize the damage endured before we get there. May we continue to fight against those who would unjustly punish. May we continue to reject the view of those who damn. May we continue to seek a better way. So be it.
Thank you, Dylan. Good talk as always. Our prayer today is Embracing the Double-Edged Universe by Kyle Johnson, a lay minister. Just as justice and judgment can have contradictory implications, this prayer notes the double-edged, paradoxical aspects of life and the import of embracing it all, making peace with it. Mystery of the universe, you who some think of not as a being among other beings, but as the very ground of being itself, thank you for this day, for another sunrise, another chance for us to witness the wonder of creation. We know that yours is a creation that is truly double-edged, a yin-yang universe, for it is indeed one in which the life-giving flame can also burn. But it is also one in which the dark, cold, misting rain gives rebirth to spring. And it is one in which, paradoxically, our acquaintance with pain and sorrow can help us better appreciate pleasure and joy. Help us then to have the courage and strength to embrace it all, to embrace what is. Help us, we who are similarly double-edged, whose love for those closest to us can so easily provoke our own tribal instincts and prejudices, whose own pain, rather than fostering empathy and compassion, may turn us inward to dig moats, to build walls rather than bridges. So help us to embrace this double-edged yin-yang universe with courage and strength. But above all, help us to do so in a spirit of love and compassion. For this, it seems, is our eternal challenge, as it is also the wellspring of our eternal salvation. Amen. Now pause. Take a moment to think or just sit back and relax. A lot is happening. Too much is always happening, it seems. We are always a jumble of emotions, content, dissatisfied, striving, bored, happy, relaxed. Don't get overwhelmed. At least understand that things are cyclical. Seek equilibrium, balance. Join me now in silent meditation or prayer. Amen. Now, candles and stones. You are invited to come forward to light a candle of hope, memory, or gratitude. You may also wish to drop a stone of burden or forgiveness in our sacred gathered waters. Gather in lines on either side. Wait your turn, then return to your pew via the middle aisle. And I see Suzanne has got things going, so please come on up. And I guess watch the equipment over here on this side. And now for the calling of the offering. Is this on? Dylan, there we go. Okay, thank you. We come here to consider our place in the universe, to hear new and old ideas, to sing and listen to music, for fellowship. This place needs sustenance just like we do, though, and we help how we can in making sure it remains vibrant. Remember, you can donate to the church through the Breeze app, or you can go to our website, UUCO.org, or you can send donations via check directly to the church. And we will pass the baskets, and donations are welcome here. And now please stand and body your voice and facing the center aisle, sing together the offering song printed in the order of service. Thank you for giving. This money helps this church, thank you, helps us in our effort to improve the world in big ways and small. And our closing hymn, Joseph?
Please join us in singing number 1018 and come and go with me. This is verses 1, 2, and 3.
Apt emphasis on justice there. Thanks, choir. As the service winds down, ponder the differences in justice, judgment, judiciousness. Be just, try not to be judgmental. At the same time, remember that in some ways we probably are unconsciously judgmental, no matter our best intents. Try to be cognizant of that. Also keep in mind the ideas of justice vary. Understand that. Grapple with it. Now, let's extinguish the chalice. The words should be in the order of service. We extinguish this chalice,
but not the warmth of love, the light of truth, nor the energy of action.
And with that, that is the end of the service. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Have a good week. And remember, there will be coffee downstairs. So have a good one.